What's up, y'all? Welcome to Glasses and Grills, where sophistication and culture collide. Today, I'm going to be doing a semi-comprehensive recap of The Rage of Dragons. I've heard that the third book in the Burning series by Evan Winter is supposed to be dropping on May 8th. I figured I'd do y'all a solid and recap The Rage of Dragons for y'all. So you would probably be able to pass a test on the information I'm going to give you, but if the test is super detailed, like what color does the Enlovu wear when they're fighting, I don't know, child. So without further ado, this is the Rage of Dragons recap part 1, Tau Solarin, the colors of a certified Crashout. So something that's crucial to understanding the Rage of Dragons is the caste system that the characters work off of. And I'm going to explain that and break that down now for you. The Omehi people, or the Chosen, is an all-encompassing term for everybody as a whole. But within the Omehi, you have nobles and you have lessers. Nobles are stronger, they're faster, they're born with all of these natural advantages that make them naturally better fighters. And the lesser, they're considered to be weaker, they're considered to be not as smart, they're not considered to be as polished. So the nobles have their own version of a military called the Enlovu, and the lessers have their own version of a military branch called Ihashi. And there's testing for each military branch, but the testing is conducted separately. So that's something that's really important to note. There is a group of women that can commune with dragons and also pull power from a spiritual realm called Isiogo, called the Gifted. And they usually wield their powers and team up with other nobles for the sake of combat. But I also want to point out that for the Ihashi, as a lesser, if you don't pass your Ihashi testing, then you will automatically be considered Ihagu. It's essentially a death sentence. The Ihagu refers to the foot soldiers, or the soldiers that are put on the front lines. You kind of know joining that you are expendable or dispensable as a soldier. There are a lot of people who choose not to join Ihagu because you can opt not to, and those people are automatically considered to be drudge, which is the lowest you can be in the lesser caste. When I say drudge, I'm referring to those people. They are indentured servants, essentially the equivalent to an enslaved person. So chapter 1 begins 186 cycles. A cycle refers to, I would assume, a year, because it's a rotation through all of the seasons. After the Omehi people flee Osanti, their homeland, to Zita. And when they arrive to Zita, they realize that the land is already being inhabited by the Hadini. The Omehi people believe in the goddess Ananti. That's who they worship. That's who they believe in. The Hadini refers to a group of people with special powers of their own who fall outside of the goddess's faith. So they just don't believe in her. So Zita is already being inhabited by the Hadini. And though they fight for an extremely long time, the Omehi ultimately emerge victorious and take over the land of Zita. In the first chapter, we meet our main character, Tau Solarin, and he is in a sparring training session with his best friend, Jabari Onai. Tau is a lesser and Jabari is a noble, but up to this point, that hasn't really caused any issues or problems or friction between the two men. Aaron Solarin is on the sidelines. He's Tau's father, and he's sort of just coaching them and giving them feedback as they spar. We also meet Zuri, who is Tau's childhood crush, and Zuri's best friend, Anya. The two women are handmaidens in the Onai Keep. They work for Jabari's family, and they're watching the two men train. Now, at this point, of course, Tau, being the simpy, sappy, suffering succotash that he is, tries to impress Zuri during this training session and falls flat on his face. Now, I want y'all to hold on to this feeling of Tau being a simpy, sappy man, because it does not last very long. Spoiler alert. After he falls flat on his face, a messenger named Burko runs up and interrupts the training session to inform Jabari that Queen Ayana has died of cancer and that her granddaughter Siora will be taking over the throne as queen. I don't know why, but Burko feels like this is a good time to also mention that if Siora doesn't produce an heir soon, then the line will probably end with her grandmother and her mother having passed away. He also mentions that he feels like she's too young to be on the throne, which... So after Burko gives them that information, two drudge come up to deliver food rations. The lessers obviously get less food. Sometimes the nobles have meat in their rations and the lessers don't. Like, just little small differences like that, just to emphasize how these people are viewed. Tao can tell that the drudge that delivers his food is starving and malnourished, so when no one is looking, he sneaks the drudge some of his food rations. His dad actually saw him and commends him as they start to walk home. But of course, they can't make it there because Arin's second in command runs up, Enkidu, and basically is like, the Hedini are coming, the Hedini are coming. The Hedini are raiding, and they are in Daba, which is, to my understanding, right next door to where Tao and his family stay. So Enkidu is, of course, he's freaking out because he's like, yo, we about to die. So at that point, Arin goes into battle mode. He uses his military training, his military background, and he's like, look, I need to talk to Lacan. Lacan is Jabari's older brother, and he is not my favorite character. Arin is basically saying, like, I need to talk to Lacan. He's the first son. We need aid from Enlovu soldiers because with just the Ihagu soldiers we have alone, we ain't gonna win this. Enkidu's like, let me stop you right there, player. I already talked to Lacan. He said he's not helping. But he did say that he wanted you personally to go and defend Daba. So handle that. So Arin is basically like, I gotta do what I gotta do on some Tommy Pickles. He tells Tao, like, go home. Like, this is probably not going to be good for you if you stay and try to fight. So Tao is like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Dad, but I'm going to go grab my sword that belonged to my grandfather and I'm going to fight. Tao feels like Lacan is a weenie junior because he don't want to help. So he goes to the Onai Keep to see Jabari. When he gets to the gate of the Onai Keep, he runs into Oching, who is a keep guard. He's literally a keep guard off of the strength of Tao's father, because the book literally describes him as a person whose family is either all dead or drudge, and he was on his way there. But because of Arin's word, he becomes a keep guard for the Onais. And so he kind of puts up a fight at first. He gives Tao some pushback, but then he eventually ends up opening the gate. And he literally tells Tao, like, no, this is solely off the strength of your father, nothing else. I did not do this for you. So as he's running into the keep, Tao runs into Jelani, who is his little sister. And this is where we learn that Tao's mother is married to Jabari's father. Jelani is, even though she's also a lesser, she sort of looks down on Tao and is like, why are you here? Like, my mother would be mad. And he's like, you mean my mother? They have that little exchange, and then Tao runs to the bathhouse and finds Jabari. I don't really know what was going on in the bathhouse, but that's really not for me to say. Tao tries to convince Jabari to get his mother to override Lacan's orders. And Jabari is like, hey, there's no use. She's never gonna go against Lacan over me. So we might as well just try to figure something out. Tao also realizes at this point that Lacan didn't tell Jabari anything about the raid. So Jabari devises a plan, which is actually really clever, to get the Enlovu to send aid. So Jabari can't directly defy Lacan's orders, but what he does is tell the military that he is going to help his friend defend Daba against the Hedini. And because those Enlovu are sworn to protect Jabari, they have to go with him as aid. So it's really a genius plan. When Tao and Jabari leave the keep, Daba is basically already up in flames and they're headed to Kedem, where Tao and everybody stays. Tao looks to his left, he looks to his right, and he realizes that the Hedini are already starting to close in on them. They fight their way to a barricade, and Tao has to kill a Hedina along the way, and it freaks him out a little bit, but Jabari is able to kind of coach him through everything, and they make it through. They also run into a few other soldiers on their path. The fighting continues, and Tao spots an enraged Ngoyama. And Ngoyama refers to the Chosen's best fighters. So they are selected from the best of each military. But if an Ngoyama is a greater noble or a royal noble, they can also team up with a gifted and use the gifted's powers to become even bigger than they are, even faster than they are, even stronger than they are. So think of an enraged Ngoyama as the equivalent to Super Mario eating the mushroom and then growing really large and being able to run fast and jump higher. Or if you're a Dragon Ball Z fan, think of it as the difference between Goku and Super Saiyan Goku. As they're observing the enraged Ngoyama, we are told a little bit more about Arin's history, and we learn that Arin wants Tao to be his equivalent. He wants Tao to pass his Ahashi testing, serve in the military. Arin trained in the Ahashi, and he also served 6 cycles. So in his final cycle of service, he meets Tao's mother, Imani Tafari, who is High Common, and they run away together to Kedem after his service is complete against the wishes of Imani's father. And in Kedem, Aaron is basically seen as a god because of his military status and his history in the Ihashi. So he is automatically made second in command of Mbusi Onai's Ihagu soldiers. And then Imani becomes a handmaiden in the keep. And after Tao is born, Imani grows weary of living like a common. And so she leaves Aaron and Tao and marries Jabari's father, McKenna. This hurts Aaron. Obviously, he was devastated, but at that point, he dedicates his life to being the best father he can to Tao and to being the best fighter. And he eventually comes to lead the Ihaku instead of just being second in command. So after the Mbusi's firstborn Lakan, who is Jabari's older brother, fails his Inlovu testing, Mbusi can't afford to pay for another Inlovu teacher. So she asks Aaron if he'll train Jabari, and of course he accepts because this will give him a chance not only to train Jabari, but to have his son fight with a noble every day and train him at the same time. So back at the scene of the battle, a Hedena climbs on top of a hill and blows a horn. Now Tao and everybody else, they don't really know what this means, but they know it's not good. Well, after the Hedena blows the horn, the group of Hedeni attack the enraged Ingoyama. And one of the innervators blasts her power in order to try to stop the Hedeni's attack on the enraged Ingoyama. And Tao gets caught in the line of fire of the innervator's power and is temporarily sucked to Isiogo. And he looks around and everything looks different. And everyone, including him, is glowing yellow, like a golden light. And just when a crazy looking creature is about to pounce and attack Tao, Aaron pulls him out of the line of fire. And Tao is temporarily bewildered and kind of confused, but Aaron assures him that that feeling will pass. It's just a part of being caught in an innovator's power. I don't know if I've mentioned this at this point, but though the gifted are extremely strong, their powers are temporary. The enrager that is increasing the Ingoyama's capabilities, her power is kind of starting to dwindle and die out. So the Ingoyama makes the decision to sacrifice himself by disconnecting from the gifted so that he can spare her life. And at that point, the Hedeni attack the Ingoyama and kill him. The Hedeni then head to an abandoned home on the land, and they are searching for something inside, but no one can really tell what they're looking for. After the Ingoyama disconnects from her, the enrager then calls a dragon and attempts to burn all of the Hedeni who are trying to get to this abandoned house. And while she's successful in burning some of them still make it to the abandoned house. And we discover that one of the gifted is inside the house. And at that point, the Hedeni start to drag her out, and then she's knocked on the temple and passes out. The Hedena at that point on the hill blows their horn, and all the Hedeni start to retreat. The chosen people, they start cheering. They're excited because even though this has devastated their town, they are victorious. So Tao starts hearing these choking sounds, and he looks around and he sees the enrager that was calling the dragon kind of convulsing. He obviously wants to help, but his father could just kind of like, that's grown man business. You know what I'm saying? That's gifted business. We're gonna leave that alone. And they head home. Chapter 3 begins with Tao just going through it after what he experienced in the battle, having to kill a Hedena, even though he only killed one person, but having to kill that person and watching other people die in the battle, it's just not sitting right with him. He's having nightmares. So when he wakes up, his dad is offering him food, and Tao is like, I'm not hungry. He's still nauseated from the night before. And his dad is like, you have training, you need to eat. Tao meets up with Jabari for an afternoon training session, and they bond over how worn out they are from the battle the night before. And while practicing, Tao thinks of McKenna, his mother's husband. Now, McKenna passes his Ihashi testing, but he is too badly injured to actually serve and is ultimately dismissed from the Ihashi and given this really nice job so that he's able to take care of his family. And at this point, Tao is finding it very hard not to be envious of McKenna, because after experiencing all the events that happened in the battle the night before, he's like, I don't know if the Ihashi is for me. I don't want to kill. I don't want to die. Tao devises a plan to pass his Ihashi testing, but then also become too badly injured so that he's unable to serve and is ultimately dismissed. So that way he can marry Zuri and they can live out a happier life off the battlefield. Tao is by himself, just kind of reflecting, and out loud he says to himself, "I'm done with killing." And he turns around and realizes that Zuri heard what he said. So Zuri does her best at this point during this conversation to kind of reassure Tao that he is killing, yes, but for the right reasons. He's killing to protect the Omehi, the chosen. So he is telling Zuri about the battle. He tells her that he saw dragons, and Zuri is enthralled by that. Zuri kind of schools Tao on the different types of gifted that he saw during the battle. Zuri kisses Tao after this conversation is over, and if Tao was weak in the knees, he is now on bended knee. He is boys to men. The next morning, Tao's whole life has changed since Zuri came in, and he knew back then. And he and Jabari go off without Aaron. It's not really clear to me, or I just can't remember what they're doing at this point, but this is where Tao confesses to Jabari that he is in love with Zuri, and he tells him about the kiss. He tells Jabari about his plan to join the Ihashi, but ultimately be dismissed. And Jabari promises to put in a good word for Tao whenever he is dismissed from the Ihashi so that he can have a decent job and be able to take care of Zuri and whatever family that they build. When Jabari and Tao return to Kedem, Zuri is kind of looking distraught and tells them that Aaron's second in command, who is also Anya's father, Enkidu. We've talked about him before, but Anya is his daughter. I don't know if I mentioned that in the first part, but Enkidu is accused of attacking a noble, and Zuri tells Tao and Jabari that Lacan tried to force himself on Anya, and Enkidu caught him in the act, so he attacked him. Tao knows that Aaron would never put Enkidu to death because even though Enkidu is his second in command and they work together, they're best friends. Their families hang out together. Y'all are going to be hard pressed to get Aaron to punish Enkidu in any way possible. They run to where Aaron is, and Lacan, Jabari's older brother, is there, and he is calling for Enkidu's head at this point. He's like, hey, bring him out. Like, he needs to be executed. He needs to be made an example of. He attacked a noble. And Lacan is obviously pissed because that's his like default setting is mad. In order to appease Lacan, Aaron concocts this story that Anya enticed Lacan and seduced him and forced, kind of basically it was the opposite way around. And he does this so that obviously to protect Lacan's reputation, which I don't know what we're protecting at this point. There's nothing there. He gets Lacan to agree to sort of a ceasefire. Like, okay, we don't have to kill Enkidu, but his family, including Anya, can be banished. They can leave Kedem first thing in the morning and everything will be okay. So Lacan agrees to that and everyone kind of leaves and goes home. And Zuri just sits in Tao's arms and just cries because her best friend is about to be banished from the only home they've ever known for life. So obviously she's taking it really hard. So a few seasons have passed now, and all of the male Lessers that were born in the same cycle as Tao are made to be men. So this priest comes and speaks encouraging words over them, and then they're given guam, which is a yellow sludge that is distilled from scorpion poison. So Tao hates the taste of it, but not too long after he starts tweaking. It seems like everything is a blur for him, but he does remember that Jabari gives him a brand new pair of boots, and then Zuri finds him and they dance. But after that, Zuri kind of escorts him home and passes him off to his dad, who gets him undressed and then puts him to bed. So then Tao is woken up by Aaron screaming, and he throws on clothes, he runs outside, and his father tells him that Ikan, who replaced Enkidu as Aaron's second in command, found Enkidu and his family tossed over a cliff, like their remains tossed over a cliff, and that Lacan had them unalived. Naturally, Aaron is pissed to the highest festivity, and he's ready to kill Lacan. He wants Lacan's head. The only thing that stops him is Ikan being like, look, Aaron, I agree with you, but they will execute Tao. They will execute his little sister. They will execute Imani if you do this, because he's a noble. Simply because he's a noble and you're a lesser. Aaron makes Tao promise to keep everything under wraps because they can't let the Khan know that they're onto him. At training the next day, Tao is kind of distracted, but Jabari does mention to him that the queen will be passing through Karam on her way to Gigambe. Jabari says that there's some sort of formal event happening at his house later that night, and he invites Tao to be his Akondisi, who is like a person's most trusted advisor and right-hand man. And he wants Tao to accompany him to this event, and Tao agrees. So later that night, Tao goes with Jabari to the keep where everyone is frantically waiting for the queen to pass through, and Tao goes to the bathhouse and finds Zuri cleaning. And when she sees him, she just runs up to him and gives him this big hug and tells Tao that her testing day to test if she is gifted or not is set. They also find out that it's the same day that Jabari is having Tao accompany him to his Enlovu testing. Zuri then expresses sadness because if she is gifted and he joins the Ihashi, then there's really no way for them to be together, at least right away. Tao promises Zuri that he'll always come back to her, but he can't bring himself to tell her about Anya and Enkidu and the rest of the family. The next day, the queen passes through Kedem, and Tao and Jabari, mostly Jabari, are taken by how beautiful she is and young she is. And this is also where we meet her champion, Abshir Okar. Tao describes him literally as a man who looked like he is carved from rock. And he also describes him as a little bit older because technically he is the former queen's champion. Siora hasn't had a chance to replace him yet. There is no higher honor for a chosen male than to be a queen's champion. They have access to the queen, the council, and they act as the queen's partner. Queens aren't required to marry, but they do choose a champion with producing heirs in mind. So typically, if the queen has a champion, he also acts as her lover. We also meet Kayed Oro. A Kayed is the person who is the leader of the gifted. And then we also meet the chairman of the Guardian Council, Abasi Odili. Abasi has a personal Igoyama of his own, Dejan Olujimi. He has another warrior that he's grooming, Kellen Okar. At this point, we learn that Kellen Okar's uncle is the current champion. And Kellen Okar's father was killed because he retreated during a battle after he reported that as they were fighting the Hadini exhibited gifts and powers, and it scared him, and so he ran away, and so they executed him for that. No one believed him about the Hadini also. This is where we start to see a wedge start to be driven between Jabari and Tao, because Tao is kind of wanting to play devil's advocate for Kellen's dad and kind of say, well, you know, what if the Hadini did exhibit powers? What if they did exhibit gifts and he didn't run for no reason? And Jabari kind of says, we didn't execute him because we felt like he lied about the Hadini. We executed him for behaving like a lesser and running away. And Tao brings up an excellent point of, if the chosen people don't run, then why are we on Zeta instead of Osante, our homeland? And Jabari gets annoyed by this, and it's just like, okay, like, yeah, I've been going lightweight on you on the battlefield, and now I'm about to turn up because you out of pocket. This is where we're starting to transition from Simp Sap Tao to Crashout Tao. It's the morning of Jabari's Enlovu testing, and Lacan joins Tao and Jabari because Jabari's father is having some gout problems. So Jabari's father can't attend. And Aaron gives them a pep talk of some sort and then attempts to go get some documents signed that are necessary to be signed in order for, I guess, the testing to commence. And Lacan stops Aaron in his tracks and introduces Kasigo, who is a noble, and Kasigo's father. He asks if Kasigo can warm up with Tao. During the warm-up, Jabari points out Jayed Aim to both Kasigo and Tao. And Jayed Aim is cold on the sword, okay? Like, there's no better fighter than him. That's the way they explain it. He is a lesser, and he will be at the Ihashi testing, so Jabari kind of winks at Tao and is like, hey, try to get in Jayed's scale. Tao and Kasigo continue to warm up, and Kasigo goes crazy, and Tao does this like spin move and knocks him out of the way. Kasigo falls flat on his face and breaks his nose. The testing is dead silent at this point until Abasi Odili walks up and starts slow clapping. He walks over and assesses Castigo's injuries, and then he turns and starts to leave and says that if a fighter that is this mid can be bested by a lesser, then we're wasting our time with these dudes at this in-lovu testing. Like, we might as well not even test the rest of these dudes if this is any indication of what's finna happen. And Tao tries to fix his mistake by pleading with Abasi Odili to let the in-lovu testing continue. As Tao is pleading for Abasi Odili to let the testing continue, Lacan makes some sort of like snide remark under his breath, and Tao just turns on him and is like, look, ain't gonna be too many more lessers. Ain't gonna be too many more low commons. Ain't gonna be too many more common pets. Abasi Odili witnesses this and he's like, look, I'm tired of this little lesser thinking that he can disrespect nobles. Because at the end of the day, Lacan, poison though he may be, is a noble. So he basically challenges Tao to a duel and having Kellen fight in his place. Kellen does everything that he can to try to appease both sides. So he ends up cutting off Solarin's hand. Tao is like, he points his sword towards Kellen. It's basically squaring up. This only worsens things, of course, because lesser. There's no other reason why. At this point, you have to know. Abasi Odili is like, nah, finish him. Hand, nah, finish him. So he calls Dejin Ulujimi up, and he is the one that ultimately unalives Solarin. Tao holds his father in disbelief and is frozen in shock. And Jayed starts to just kind of step in and delegate tasks to people on Tao's behalf. This is where we start to see the shift in Tao, because in the beginning of the book, killing made him want to settle down and injure himself so that he can live with Zuri. So at this point is when he literally expresses the desire to kill all three people who he feels are responsible for his father's death, which would be Abasi Odili, Kellen Okar, and Dejin Ulujimi, and he vows to kill them at that moment. Tao, Jabari, and Lacan are walking home. They're accompanied by some guards, and Lacan is upset. He's complaining that Odili canceled the testing, and Jabari is like, look, I can test later. It's not that big of a deal. I can test in the north. It's no big deal. Lacan is like, look, I'm not just going to stop talking about this because this common lost control and let his father get killed. Before he can even finish the sentence, Tao is on his ass. Beat him up, beat him up, beat him up. And I was very happy at this point. They pull him apart and Lacan is like, all right, enough is enough. I'm tired of this little common pet thinking he runs something over here. Jabari is like, my brother didn't burn too many bridges and there's nothing I can do for him now. So he tells Tao, you can attend your father's burning tonight, but in the morning you have to leave Kedem. Like, I have to banish you. So later on, Zuri finds Tao at his house and she offers him her sincerest condolences and is just crying, and she reveals that she is gifted. She proposes that her and Tao run away together. And Tao is basically like, well, no, if you're gifted, then they're going to search to the ends of the earth to find you. Like, there's nowhere we can run where we'll be safe and not looking over our shoulder. So Tao rejects her and tells Zuri that about his banishment and that he's leaving Kedem in the morning, and that's that. So he waits until Zuri is gone, and then he goes to pay Lacan Onai a visit. So at this point, we switch to Lacan's perspective. Lacan basically confirms that he intends to arrest Tao at his father's burning and then execute him the following morning for beating him up. Lacan falls asleep and then is awoken to find Tao at the foot of his bed. And Tao doesn't have any intention on killing Lacan at this moment. He just wants to stop in to tell Lacan that he doesn't want Lacan to taste the sweetness of fruit or feel the sun on his face or the sand beneath his feet or the water against his chin without knowing that one day Tao is coming to kill him. I just want you to know it's coming so that you have no moment of peace in your life. So he intends on doing this by becoming a Hashi. And when you are a Hashi, you obtain military status. And military status allows you to blood duel any other chosen male from any of the other military branches in the cast. He tells him, I am your curse, I am your end. Do you know how much you gotta hate somebody to tell them that you are their end? Lacan's ego can't take that, and he don't want to let that slide. So they start squabbling, of course. Lacan attempts to stab Tao, but he misses and gives Tao an extreme cut across his face from, I want to say they say to the edge of his eye all the way to his ear, like his ear here. So like, that's how I'm picturing it. And in the midst of the fight, Tao is forced to unalive Lacan. Because it's at some point, it's either Tao or Lacan. So he has to unalive Lacan in order to save himself. Now we go back to Tao's point of view. And in his chapter, Oching runs in to the room and discovers the scene and starts freaking out. Now remember, Oching is the keep guard that would not have a job if it wasn't for Tao's father. He sees Lacan is dead and tells Tao to get out. Like, go. Whatever way you came in, go, and I'll take care of this. Because if they discover you in here with him, you're gonna die. Like, they're gonna kill you. Tao is like, good looks. And he climbs down out of the window. Oching basically stages a fall down the stairs to explain the blunt force trauma to Lacan's head, the back of his head. Tao decides to trek to Kikambe and to test Ihashi. After almost 3 days of walking, Tao arrives in Kigambe and the guardian ceremony is underway, and Tao realizes that the Enlovu initiates receive 9 dragon scale weapons to every Ihashi's 1 dragon scale weapon. And the Enlovu initiates enter the stage. Tao recognizes Kellen Okar immediately and beelines to the stage in Crashout mode, and he pulls out his weapon. Guards see Tao walking towards the stage with a weapon and they try to apprehend him, but he kind of just like hits a bunch of spin moves and is able to get away from them by hiding on a roof until he loses them. That night, Tao finds an alley to sleep in and then awakes before the sun rises. When Tao arrives at the hero circle where the Ihashi testing is taking place, he is a little intimidated because he doesn't have that much food left from his journey. He's dehydrated, he's hot. 1 in 10 men pass the Ihashi testing, and the rest are Ihagu, and if they refuse that, then they are automatically knocked down to drudge, as we've spoken about before. Ihagus don't receive military status also, so that's why it's so important for Tao to pass his Ihashi testing, because he needs that military status in order to achieve the ultimate revenge. So the match rules are the proven, who is a judge in this particular case, attends a fight, and they count each hit you take as a point against you and each hit you give as a point for you. So how you win is if your opponent begs for Goddess's mercy, or if you just have more points when the match is over. And matches last 200 breaths. Goddess's mercy is the only way to stop a person from attacking you. Not stop, not ah, not ooh, not damn. Goddess's mercy is the only way to get a person to let up off you. How you lose or disqualify yourself: step outside the ring, hit your opponent in the head with a weapon. If you lose any of your matches on the first 2 out of 3 days, then you're out. You're either Ihagu or drudge. And if you make it to day 3 of training, you're in. But you're automatically made an initiate of the Ihashi if before day 1 or 2 is over, you win 10 matches. Tao's number is called for his first fight, and his opponent falls higher in the lesser caste. So Tao is shook. Like, he's intimidated. He feels like, okay, there's no way I'm going to beat this guy. Tao, as you can imagine, is losing this first match terribly. So he comes up with a plan to taunt his opponent. So Tao apparently says just the right thing to get his opponent to crash out. And his opponent swings his sword. And Tao puts his head in the line of fire in order to disqualify his opponent and ultimately win the match by default. That's exactly what happens. And his opponent is pissed, like, no, like, it was a mistake. He did that on purpose. And the proven or the judge is like, we don't care, girl. Leave. As Tao's fighting his matches throughout the day, he sees this swole, brolic dude. And this dude is just throwing people across the ring, picking people up, spinning them around, just like doing crazy stuff. So at the end of day 1, Tao has won 4 matches total. And on day 2, Tao's fifth fight re-injures his cut on his face. It reopens. Tao wins his fifth battle by the skin of his teeth, and then he is called to his sixth battle. And who walks up but none other than the brolic, swole dude that he saw the day before. So this big brolic dude introduces himself as Udwak and tells Tao, yeah, this is my ninth fight, so good luck. This fight is treacherous, but Tao will not give up. He ends the fight with his wrist broken. He re-injures his cut once more. Udwak loses it because he can't take the fact, his ego can't take the fact that somebody is not backing down from him. So he starts beating Tao up, hitting Tao with his shield, and he almost hits Tao in the chest and caves his chest in. But the proven is like, hey, the match is over. Like, that's it. And if you kill him, you're disqualified. You forfeit yourself. So Udwak just kicks Tao in the head and Tao passes out. Tao wakes up in what we find out is the Ihashi initiate tent, and he has Udwak standing over him and another character that we meet named Hadith standing over him. And Hadith informs Tao that the three of them have been selected as Ihashi initiates. Now, you might be confused as to why that is, and most of them are too, because Hadith points out that he and Udwak have won 10 matches and Tao only has 5 wins, 1 draw, which is the match he just fought with Udwak, and a broken wrist. So Hadith then reveals that Udwak was told if Tao passed away, then Udwak would lose his place in the scale. So a little while later, Jayed comes to visit Tao and explains that he selected Tao to join his scale and reveals to Tao that he wants to try out some different combat techniques to rival Enlovu fighters. And of course, Tao perks up at this because he's like, this is exactly what I needed. I needed a scale that was going to teach me how to beat a noble. Scale Jayed is made up of 51 men, and Tao notices immediately that he doesn't fit the mold of these other fighters. He's much smaller and weaker in his mind in comparison than the other men in the scale. So all the Ihashi initiates have been selected for their scales, and they're traveling to the southern Isikolo, and an Isikolo is just a school, to begin their training. And Tao is having a hard time in training naturally because his dominant wrist is broken, his sword fighting wrist is broken, so he's having to fight with his left hand. And Jayed offers additional training in the morning, and along with some of the others in the scale, which includes Udwak, Hadith, Chinadu, Ya, and Jengo, Tao decides to add the morning training to his schedule. And at this point, Tao is kind of an outcast. He's sort of a pariah because the others in the scale and just the other Ihashi initiates are looking down on him like, you know, you didn't win 10 matches. You technically don't deserve to be here. So Tao then learns that they will participate in these mock battles called skirmishes. For the skirmish rules, a fighter is considered to be alive until a bone in his body is broken. He touches the ground with anything but his feet or his knees. He's rendered unconscious, or he calls for the goddess's mercy. Very similar to the testing. And nobody's actually supposed to pass away in these. Not to say it doesn't happen, but nobody's actually supposed to pass away because they're mock battles. So their first skirmish comes up and Scale Jayed wins, but the scale is not really messing with Tao still. So he decides to commit himself to training and nothing else. Scale Jayed goes on to fight and win 2 more skirmishes, and then they travel to the Crags, which is land that has been made to mimic a lot of the popular battlefields that they will fight on. They go to the Crags to watch other Ihashi initiates fight against an Enlovu scale. So Jayed tells the scale that the Enlovu will have the gifted at their disposal, just as they would in a real battle. And this is where we're introduced to Oyibo. Tao describes Oyibo as boyish, and he's shook at the idea that the gifted are being used in a mock battle. Jayed also explains that time works differently in Isiogo. So one breath where they are is essentially 50 to 100 in Isioko. So time moves a lot faster there. For the scrimmage that they're watching, Scale Najir, the Ahashi scale, and Scale Oban is set for their next scrimmage. So Scale Jayed they express concern for the Enlovu scale because they're only fighting with a third of their men. And Jayed explains that if they're fighting with a gifted, then they don't need all of their men. I think the reason Jayed takes them to this skirmish is to kind of get them to understand what they're going up against and how much more advantages nobles have over them if they can win a skirmish with just a third of their men against 50 of the Ihashi soldiers. During the skirmish, the Ahashi scale obviously loses because the Enlovu fighters have an innervator with them. So as long as they incapacitate enough men at one time, the rest of the Enlovu can take out whoever hasn't been caught in the innervator's line of fire and win the battle. Tao is disappointed by this because he feels like, well, why am I training so hard and fighting so hard to live up to what Jayed said about being able to rival Enlovu fighters if we're not even fighting the entire scale of Enlovus and we're still losing? So just to kind of relax and take a load off, they go to a tavern in Citadel City, which is the big city, where the queen lives and stuff like that. As the scale is in the tavern drinking, you can kind of feel that they're starting to warm up to Tao more and they're starting to respect him more, I guess because of his dedication to his training. And as he's drinking in the tavern, he sees Zuri out the window and essentially chases her until he catches up with her. And Zuri is surprised to see Tao, of course, but she reveals that Ikan told her what happened to Anya and her family. This is where Tao tells Zuri about his plan to become Ihashi so that he can obtain military status. And Zuri then tells Tao that Jabari ended up testing Enlovu in the north and he passed, so now he's an Enlovu initiate. She also mentions that she is one of the best in her cycle and is doing very well as a gifted. So 3 Enlovu approach Tao and Zuri and they're like, hey lady gifted, are you good? Because this little lesser is around you, we just wanted to make sure. And he decides to just go back to his scale. So at this point in the book, Tao is training every single morning with the Jayed 5, which is him, Uduak, Hadith, Chinadu, and Ya, with the rest of the scale in the afternoons, and then at night with the men being punished for misconduct. So he's training around the clock. Tao also comes to the realization that he is no longer right-handed. And during some sparring training with Oyibo breaks Tao's sword in half. And Tao thinks quickly and goes to grab another sword, crosses them, and then begins fighting with 2 swords. Now, this works for Tao because even though his right hand is no longer his dominant hand, it still has the muscle memory from the time he's trained from being a child up until now. So he can fight equally well with both hands. He's been able to beat everyone in the scale except for Uduak. So he is dreading, absolutely dreading fighting Uduak again, even during training. The next day, Tao and Uduak are called to spar, okay? And Tao grabs his second blade to the surprise of most of the people in the scale. And Tao gets the best of Uduak. This is somebody that, as you all know, he could not beat. Though he would not stop trying in the Ihashi testing, he could not beat Uduak. And even throughout training, that's something they emphasize, is that Uduak is the one fighter that Tao has a hard time beating. Uduak calls for the goddess's mercy because Tao kind of loses control and starts to picture everybody that is responsible for his father being dead. So he loses control and then Jayed calls the match. Uduak actually ends up in the infirmary. So after Tao gets the best of Uduak, Jayed approaches Tao and advises him to keep fighting with 2 swords and literally says that there will come a day when no lesser in all the peninsula can stand against Tao if he continues to train as hard as he is and if he continues to fight with 2 swords. The next day, they're training for their upcoming skirmish against an Enlovu scale, and Hadith convinces Tao to go and visit Uduak in the infirmary. And when Tao arrives there, Uduak confesses that at one point he beat a petty noble in a fight, which is unheard of for a lesser to beat a noble in a fight. Uduak also confesses that he has not been beaten in a fight since he was a child. So I think this scene is kind of to not only for us to see, because Uduak was the most resistant to Tao. Also, I mean, because Tao almost, their fight was a draw, so he was salty about that. But also because none of them felt like Tao deserved to be there. So to hear Uduak completely do a 180 and be like, yeah, like, you're the strongest one here now. Like, I'm not used to not being the strongest. And he just gives Tao his props, and, they kind of just solidify that they're sword brothers. Uduak is jacked up, so he can't fight in the next skirmish, which makes morale really low. So during the skirmish against the Inlovu, the innovator who the Inlovu is utilizing sucks all of their souls to Isiogo. The innovator holds their souls in Isiogo too long, which has some side effects that we'll learn about later. And then Tao just has a hard time regaining his footing, but he's able to regain his footing enough to fight the Inlovu's Inkokeli. And the Inkokeli of a scale is essentially just like the leader, the person who's appointed I guess it would be like the equivalent of a general, but just for the scale. Scale Jayed ends up beating the Inlovu scale, and the men go back to Citadel City to celebrate their big win, and Tao meets Zuri once again. Scale Jayed's win against the Inlovu scale has caused quite a stir because that does not happen. Lessers don't beat nobles. So the fact that this one scale was able to is kind of troubling and is causing all of this tension and commotion. So Zuri tells Tao that Preceptor Inti, who is training the gifted, is asked to step down from her teaching duties after what the innovator did. Tao has all these questions about the gifted and Isiogo and how it all works. So the goddess Ananti created everything and gave all the different races of men different gifts to commune with her. But Ukufa grew jealous of her, and many races of people turned against the goddess. So the Omehi stayed loyal to Ananti, and Ananti created Isiogo as from her body and its energy to be a prison to hold Ukufa and his demons. The goddess couldn't finish the prison in time. So Ukufa drew as much energy as he could from Umlaba, which is the mortal realm. And this caused all the races of men to lose their immortality, and it terrified them. So some called to Ukufa for help, and Ukufa offered them immortality in exchange for their souls and service. And these people became the call. Tao doesn't believe this story. He feels like it's just a story that's been told to children to scare them. But Zuri assures him that this is what she's been learning and training. This is kind of the basis of how the gifted's power works, because they have to pull their power from Isiogo. And I also want to mention that the call is the reason why the Omehi people fled Osanti, their homeland, because it was being invaded by the call. But Zuri then explains that anybody can enter Isiogo, and what makes someone gifted is not the fact that they can go to Isiogo or pull power from Isiogo, but that they can remain shrouded while there. So remember when I told y'all about the glowing light, how when Tao gets caught in the line of fire from the innovator in the very first battle in Kedem, he can see that everybody else, including himself, is glowing. That is your soul glowing. And that attracts demons in Isiogo. But if the demons kill you in Isiogo, as long as you're not pulling power from Isiogo, you don't die. Well, you die in Isiogo, but then you're immediately just brought right back to Umlaba, which is the mortal realm. But if you pull energy from there, then you become corporeal in Isiogo, and you can actually be killed. And that is considered to be demon death. So you can visit Isiogo at any time and even be killed by demons, but you won't actually die unless you're pulling energy from Isiogo. Now, the reason the gifted are special and can pull energy from Isiogo without being discovered is because them being gifted allows them to be shrouded while they're pulling energy from Isiogo, so the demons never can see them. But remember, I mentioned that that is temporary, and at some point your shroud can disappear. But because the gifted is pulling energy from Isiogo, they usually die if their powers run out in Isiogo. I really hope I explained that correctly. Tao asks Zuri to teach him how to bring himself to Isiogo, and he is able to accomplish that as they're standing in the middle of Citadel City. And then Zuri tells him about this trick where you can just expel all of the breath out of your body, and it would essentially be the equivalent of the demons killing you. It'll just force you back to the mortal realm. But Tao chooses not to do that. When he goes to Isiogo, he tries to fight the demons and gets killed by the demons, and then is once again resurrected right there in front of Zuri. And Zuri calls him crazy. But because when you enter Isiogo, you are bewildered after the fact and you feel all these after effects, Zuri kind of escorts him as far as she can out of Citadel City. He finds his sword brothers. As they're walking back, Tao keeps seeing these strange shadows in the tall grass, which we discover are demons. Because when you are in Isiogo too long, it gives you demon visions, which forces you to see demons in real life that others can't see. So I feel like that's a good place to stop. That's chapters 1 through 7. So I'm gonna try to get this video up as soon as possible. Chapters 8 through 16 will be out soon. I really appreciate y'all for watching. I really hope that this was as comprehensive and as detailed as I hoped it to be. I went into this assuming that you've already read the book, so I didn't want to go into too much detail, but just kind of give you a little refresher of what's happening before you go into book 3, if book 3 is even coming out on May 8th. But if not, these will be here. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.